Hello everybody, Calamity here, and I am still devastated by the last Archon quest. But enough about that. Today's video is going to be all about Candace, who's currently in the latest banner alongside Shiori and Chillinen. So if you've pulled either of those characters, chances are maybe you got a Candace in one of your pulls. This guide's going to cover everything you need to know about her though, from her talents, weapons, artifacts, constellations, teams, and we'll do a little bit of a combat showcase with her at the very end. That's a lot to go over, so let's get started. Candace is a 4-star Hydro burst support character capable of buffing normal attacks specifically for her teammates. So let's get into what her talents do and which ones are worth upgrading. First and foremost, we have the normal attack talent, which is, well, a normal attack talent. There's nothing fancy here, no special gimmicks or mechanics. In fact, we are going to be mainly skipping this talent to save you some resources if you decide to build her. So let's move on to what matters, her skill and her burst. Starting with the skill, it does have two versions, a tap and a hold. So if you quickly just tap the skill button, she's going to rush forward with her shield and deal hydro damage to the opponents in front of her. Now, if you do the hold version, she's going to raise her shield again, but actually gain a barrier that's based off her max HP and absorbs hydro damage more effectively. The barrier will last until the elemental skill is unleashed, the skill duration expires, or the barrier is broken from hard-hitting enemy attacks. Now, if the skill duration expires or the barrier is broken, she will do a much stronger damaging leaping strike that also deals hydro damage to opponents in front of her. So if we quickly take a look at the skill attributes, we can see, well, there's the shield absorption, and then we have basic and charge. So there's no like stage 1 charge, stage 2 charge like other characters kind of have. It's either you do a basic hit or you do a charged hit. That's it. There's no in between. And as we can see, the charged up damage does way more than the basic, and then it also has a 3-second longer cooldown than just tapping it. And yes, you will be using both versions of her skill depending on the situation, and as you learn to use the character or you just use her more in general, you'll understand which version of her skill should be used in what situation. Now, let's move on to her bread and butter, her burst. It's called Sacred Right, Wagtail's Tide. So several things are going to happen when you press that burst button. The first thing that she's going to do is raise her weapon instead and deal AoE hydro damage based off her max HP. And then she's going to apply what's called the Prayer of the Crimson Crown to your active character. Now that Prayer of the Crimson Crown, has 3 different effects. Let's go over them. So the first thing it's going to do is that it's going to increase damage to your normal attacks. Elemental damage, that is. So Candace is not a character that you want to use with physical damage dealing characters like Eula, Fremine, or Razor, as an example. So the second thing that's also going to happen is that she will unleash what's called a rippling wave of water that will deal hydro damage to nearby opponents, which can be triggered a limited number of times during the duration of the skill. I don't know why they worded it like that and why it's not listed, but it's 3. You can do 3 waves of damage every time you swap to a different character, and you can see there's no cooldown in between. So once you swap to 3 different characters and then you see 3 waves pop out, that is it until you use her burst again. And lastly, this effect kind of sucks, to be honest, but Sword, Claymore, and Polearm users will be obtaining the Hydro Infusion effect. If you don't know what that is, that means they'll be converted into Hydro damage instead of physical damage. This kind of ruins any sort of synergy she could have with melee characters that use normal attacks, For example, Diluc is a character that uses normal attacks in addition to his skill. I'm not sure if his Pyro Infusion will be overridden. A great way to bypass the infusion is to use her with a bow or a catalyst character like Yoimiya or Wanderer, because they utilize normal attacks in their kit, but the Hydro Infusion does not affect bow or catalysts. So we look at the skill attributes again, we can see that it lasts only 9 seconds, which honestly, I guess that is a bit longer than what it sounds. 9 seconds doesn't sound too long, but in the middle of battle, it's pretty decent. And then there's the damage bonus, so you are getting a 20% increase straight up to your normal attack elemental damage. And then the wave damage does the same amount as your initial skill. And then there's the wave instances here, 3. And it has a cooldown of 15 seconds with an energy cost of 60, which isn't too bad, you know, compared to other characters out there that have like an 80 or even a 90 burst cost. However, energy recharge will be needed. Now let's move on to her passive talents. First one is going to be called Aegis of the Crossed Arrows. So this one's going to make it so that you're always going to want to try to time her elemental skill right before you get hit, because as the skill states, if Candace is hit by an attack in the whole duration of her skill, that skill will finish charging instantly. So there's no charge up time. If you've played characters like Beidou or Yunjin, who sort of have like a parry as their elemental skill where you want to time it with their attacks, this passive skill basically does the same thing to Candace's elemental skill. Honestly, I wish this was already part of her kit and not a separate talent, but as they say, it is what it is. And so when using her skill, just try to time it with an attack and you'll immediately get the stronger version of it. Again, I'm not sure if it generates more energy particles. I'm assuming it does. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, doing the hold version will always result in more particles and more damage. Moving on to her other passive talent, Celestial Dome of the Sand. This makes it so that for every 1,000 points of Candace's max HP, she will give an increase of 0.5% increased damage to your elemental normal attacks with her burst. So on top of the 20% you're getting for every 1,000 HP you have, then you'll get 0.5% more damage. So for example, just to give you some quick maths, without any sort of buffs like Hydra Resonance and stuff like that, my Candace is sitting right above 40k HP, and honestly 50k isn't a far stretch. But 40k HP is going to result with this talent giving basically another 20% increased normal attack elemental damage with her burst. So it ends up being 40%, which is pretty nice. That's a pretty sizable buff. Again, it's a very niche and specific buff, but it's a pretty good one if you have a character that meets the criteria. And last but not least, to Dawn's First Light is going to decrease your climbing stamina consumption by 20% for your party, and this does not stack with other passive talents of the same effect. Let's move on to weapons, and with Candace being the 4-star support character that she is, it goes without saying that one of the best weapons that you can give her, and one of the most free-to-play friendly weapons, is a Favonius Lance. You might be tired of me mentioning this weapon over and over if you've watched my video or other content creator guides out there, but yeah, it is just that good. It does give you a bunch of energy recharge, which she needs, and then if you are unfamiliar with the weapon's effect, it gives you even more energy particles when you crit. The downside to this is that, well, now you need to build some crit rate on your Candace. She's not a rapid hitting character, so to speak. So if she doesn't crit to proc Favonius Lance, then you'll end up using some normal attacks here and there just to quickly activate the weapons effect. It can be a little annoying when it doesn't go off. Now, other weapons you can give her are basically any weapon that provides energy recharge or HP percentage as a substat. So for example, what I gave her is the prototype Star Glitter because I couldn't be bothered giving another Favonius Lance to her and leveling up another one. It's lazy at this point. The weapons effect is totally useless for her, but it does just give a bunch of energy recharge, which is good. Other weapons, if you have the Dialogue of the Desert Sages, which is an event weapon that was given some time ago, you know, if anyone out there has this weapon, it's okay for her, just because it gives HP percentage. She cannot proc the weapon's effect. It's literally just a stat stick. And then a 3-star option for her will be the Black Tassel because, again, HP percentage as a substat. Now, there is one more weapon that I want to point out because I'm kind of actually curious about it, is the brand new Mountain Bracing Bolt. This is a weapon that was released in Natland, and if you pulled on this current weapon banner, chances are you might have gotten one. It also provides energy recharge as a substat, so good for her as a stat stick already. However, if we go to the weapon's effect, It says decreases climbing stamina consumption by 15%. Now, I don't know if the passive will stack with this because it says it doesn't stack with similar passive talents, but it doesn't say anything about weapon effects. So you might be able to actually get a 35% decrease to your climbing stamina consumption, which is quite a lot. Will make a big difference on some of those climbs out there. But the rest of the weapons effect, not too useful. Again, using her elemental skill is fun, and it is her most damaging aspect of her kit. I think this is more of a fun option. I don't know if it's, I would say it's an optimal option, but definitely one worth considering if you have one. Move on to artifacts. Unfortunately, there isn't really quite a 4-star artifact set piece for Candace, which is kind of disappointing. But if we take a look at the top 3 recommended sets, you can see her #1 most used combination is a 2-piece from 2 different sets. So we have 2-piece Tenacity and 2-piece Emblem of Severed Fate. This can also be Vorakasha's Glow because they both do the same thing, which is to give you 20% HP. You can see here on combination 2 and 3 though, if you want to, you can give her the full Emblem of Severed Fate 4-piece, but keep in mind, yeah, you are building energy recharge on her and you'll get a nice damage increase, but her burst it's not that much of a damage, damage dealing burst. If anything, Xingqiu will benefit way more from this than Candace will. And Noblesse Oblige, the old classic 4-piece buff set. When you use her burst, which should be all the time, all of your party members will gain an additional 20% attack. And remember, this will stack with her buff, so you'll be getting a 60% increase, assuming you have 40k HP, to normal elemental damage attacks. So you could give her a Noblesse Oblige if you want. Also keep in mind, if you already have another party member that uses this set, it does not stack as the artifact set states. So you only need 1 character to hold this set. If you already have someone, then consider giving her either combination 1 or 2. And then I guess it's not listed here, but combination 4 could also be Tenacity of the Millilith plus Vorakasha's Glow, and that'll give you a 40% HP boost, which is pretty nice for her in general. And that is pretty much it for artifact sets. So when it comes to actual artifact piece substats, what are we looking for? And honestly, it's pretty straightforward. We want HP percentage, energy recharge, and crit rate. Crit rate is only important if you gave her the Favonius Lance as a weapon. If you did not, then just HP and energy recharge, and then if anything, some flat HP, I guess. And then the 4th stat on your substats could be whatever you want. Crit rate, crit damage, elemental mastery, defense, it all doesn't really matter. But HP and energy recharge are your big go-tos, and that's going to carry over to main stats as well. So when you go over to the main stats, for the Sands, we can even look here in the game that most of y'all went HP percentage. Energy recharge is also a viable option. Depending on how your character's build's going, just pick the one that you feel like you're lacking. We go to the Goblet, HP percentage, once again being the dominant choice. I see some of you gave her the Hydro damage one. That's kind of weird. I guess we have some DPS Candace users, which is totally fine. But if you're just building her as the intended 4-star, or the burst support that she is, then HP percentage is important. Last but not least, the Circlet, HP percentage, once again, going to be the top pick. I don't know why you guys gave her crit damage. But yeah, crit rate also pretty high up there as well for the Favonius Lance users. So there's your main stats, substats recommendations for Candace. Next up are her Constellations. I got mine to C6 thanks to this current banner, but usually I skip Constellations because they make guides for 5-star characters, but with her being a 4-star, let's actually talk about what they do. C1 is going to increase the duration of her burst by 3 seconds, so it goes from 9 to 12, which is a pretty nice duration buff. Next up is Moon Piercing Brilliance, and this is going to give Candace a maximum HP increase of 20% for 15 seconds when her skill hits opponents. So now her rotation should always be use her skill first into her burst, as often as you can so that you can get the most HP before activating it. Remember, that's going to give you more boost to the buff that she provides. C3 and C5 are going to increase burst and skill, so more damage there, which is nice. Something that I forgot to quickly mention is that when you do level up her burst, it's honestly, you don't even need to level it up that much because it only increases the damage. It doesn't increase, for example, the amount of damage bonus you're getting from her burst. The 20% is always going to be 20%, whether it's level 1 or level 10. So just keep that in mind. It's only going to increase the damage. C4 is an excellent constellation because it makes her holding cooldown of her skill the same as if you had tapped it. So no matter what, it's always going to be 6 seconds. This is great for her burst uptime, and it just means more elemental particles overall and even more damage overall if you're consistently able to get the leaping strike charged up version of her elemental skill. C6 is a bit of a hit and miss at the same time, but basically when you do a normal attack with another character that's affected by her burst, she will unleash a wave that does AoE hydro damage equal to 15% of her max HP. This is similar to when you activate her burst. However, this effect can only trigger once every 2.3 seconds and is considered elemental burst damage. Why they gave her this cooldown in between attacks, I don't know. I guess having it be too often would be too much, but then you have characters like Jingcho and Yelan that exist. So if anything, I wish the cooldown was shorter, maybe like 1 second. But again, it is what it is, and there's nothing we can do about it. It still means that she gives more consistent hydro application, which is great for any sort of, hydro reaction you're trying to do with her. So it's still a good constellation, just weirdly restricted. Now, let's talk about teammates for Captain America. If you did pull for Shilonen on the current banner, honestly, these two hand in hand are going to give a hydro normal attack hitting character a huge damage increase. And the first character that comes to mind is our favorite surfer, Molani. If you don't know, her elemental skill puts her on a surfboard and she does a bunch of shark attacks. Those shark attacks are considered normal attack damage, which will be buffed by Candace. Now, who can Candace work with when it comes to DPS stuff? Honestly, I want to say most characters, but not quite everyone. So for example, I stated earlier, you can't really use her with Eula because of the Hydro Infusion ruining Eula's physical damage, so there's no real synergy there. However, you can use her with characters like Chlorine, because Chlorine does normal attack damage. And if we look at the elemental skill, most characters these days have in it their self-infusion, and then it also states that it cannot be overridden by other infusions. So yeah, you could use Candace with Chlorine, and then she'll get the elemental damage buffs there. And you'll get a little bit of electro charged. However, team-wise, it's usually better to put Chlorine in an aggravate team, but if you want to use these two together, you can. It's totally an option if you want. Another character could be Arlecchino, if you have her. Same as Chlorine, she also has a self-infusion of Pyro, and this cannot be overridden as well. I mentioned Diluc earlier. It might mess up your rotation, but if we look at his elemental burst, it doesn't actually state it. It says it causes his blade to be infused with Pyro, but it does not say anything about it not being able to be overridden. So there might be some conflicts there. I'll have to try this out and let you guys know if it works or not, but I would just be careful when using Candace with characters like Diluc. But you could also use Candace with Noelle. Remember, she does geo damage with her burst. But any catalyst, so if you have Wanderer, also going to be okay here as well. And not to mention, Candace can be used in the ever popular any sort of Hyper Bloom or Burgeon team she can be used. She does, again, provide a lot of hydro application, especially if you have her as C6. You have consistent burst up time. Because with Hyper Bloom, you're constantly swapping between characters, and then once you've applied your Dendro, your Electro, and well, your Hydro, you're basically just doing normal attacks anyways. So yeah, Candace can be used with Dendro teams if you want as well, or any sort of hyper carry situation. So yeah, she has plenty of teams she can be used with. Again, if I didn't mention a team here, that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means there's so many characters and teams out there that honestly it's viable. And fortunately for Candace, she is one of the best elements in the game, Hydro, and Hydro just works well with just about everything. So plenty of options for you to use her with. Just all depends on who you have on your account. That is going to be it for this guide. We should have some combat gameplay happening in the background. I think she'll do better for you in Imaginary Theater rather than Spiral Abyss. I think Spiral Abyss is easy right now, but once Spiral Abyss starts getting harder and harder with tankier bosses and stuff, it's going to be really difficult to clear it with Candace. Not saying impossible, but just really, really difficult. But for the Imaginary Theater, where you need a ton of characters to be built and ready to go, Candace is an excellent option as long as Hydro is available. In the cycle, of course, she'll help you get through some of the more normal, regular battles without, and you can preserve your better 4-star or even 5-star characters and just use Candace instead. But I do feel like Candace has this unfortunate jack of all trades kind of design where she does kind of everything. She doesn't heal though. That's probably it. But she's not good at anything in particular. So for example, her skill, when you hold it, it's a shield. But, while she can shield herself, it's not like, why do that when I can just play Zhongli and then hold E and then there's my shield? Or, it doesn't even have to be Zhongli, any shielder. Diona, Layla, Urara, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many shielders, I could just play a different shielder, give myself a shield, I'm good to go. But I will admit, her elemental skill is more fun to use than a shielder, because it's more active, right? Especially those that like to do the parry playstyle. It's very fun. And then her burst, well, it does apply Hydro, but it doesn't do as much damage. And you're limited on the waves for some reason when you're swapping characters up to 3. Whereas, again, and we also talked about the C6, whereas in Yulan, Jingcho exist, yet they can constantly attack with their burst in tandem with your normal attacks, and just there's no cooldown. It's just constant Hydro damage, constant Hydro application from both of those characters. So it's like, why does Candace have to have this cooldown? It just seems unfair. So yeah, they do more damage than her. They also have consistent Hydro application, which is what she has, but so do other characters. But yeah, and then obviously with characters like Farina existing, it's really hard to justify using a Candace, other than, again, Theater is what comes to mind, because Candace is super niche, but Farina is just like, I buff everything kind of deal. So if you don't have Farina though, then Candace is good if you can find a character that fits what she buffs, which is, again, normal elemental damage, which is, again, I don't know why they had to make it so specific. Could have just been normal attack damage, but I guess that would have been too similar to Yunjin. But keep in mind, for those that don't remember about Yunjin's kit, when it comes to buffing normal attacks, remember that she has a quota. It's a big quota, but it is a quota. So she can only buff 30 normal attacks for 12 seconds, whereas Candace can buff an unlimited number of attacks for the same amount of time. So you don't have to worry about beating the quota. But for Yunjin, the quota is kind of high that most characters won't even reach it by the 12 seconds. But something worth noting. And with that being said, I feel like this is a great spot to end this guide here. So hopefully this was helpful to somebody out there that might have been considering building Candace. Again, remember that she is an overall decent support, but that's kind of what you get when you pick a jack of all trades character. She's just decent at everything, and that's not always a bad thing. She'll definitely be useful in Imaginary Theater, especially if you're lacking Hydro characters. So if you have any questions, leave a comment down below. Do my best to help you out. Don't forget to leave a like and or subscribe to the channel for more videos like this and other stuff. I do try to upload more consistently these days. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.